Hello friends, welcome back to another video, and this one is going to be a very straight and easy writer Q&A. I get asked a lot of different questions and I thought, why not just pull them together into one video and answer them? So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so we're starting in with the heavy hitters. What motivates you to write? Money. I'm absolutely joking. There's no money. What motivates me to write? I think motivation is a weird word, right? Because I feel like motivation assumes that there's this like magical source of energy that visits a particular group of disciplined people that helps them do the things that other people don't do. And I don't actually think motivation works that way. I can't, like people who do incredible things and achieve incredible things never put it down to motivation. It's nothing to really do with motivation necessarily. But I think what keeps me writing is how it reinforces my identity as a writer. I think if I was to answer a question about motivation, that would be what motivates me. Every time I show up for a writing block before work, every time I show up to a writing block on the weekend, I'm reinforcing an identity that I once had, that I lost, that I had to get back. And it's just sort of reaffirming to myself that I can hold this thing. I don't think you have to spend hours a day on something to be able to claim it. Even if you find 5 minutes a day to reinforce the identity of being a writer, then use the 5 minutes, use what you have. That's what I say anyway. How do you decide what to write? I just follow my curiosity. And it's something again that came up in the masterclass I did by Ava DuVernay last month. And, she was talking about making projects being an opportunity to follow your curiosity. And I think that especially as a screenwriter who hasn't made it yet, whenever that day comes, but as a screenwriter who's, still trying to get that first project greenlit, still trying to get into writers' rooms, who's still trying to win competitions and do all of that stuff, right? I think it's important for me to write things that I'm curious about. And as also, I forgot to mention, as someone who has a job, I'm doing this around my job. And so I find it's really important for me to write something that I just feel really, really deeply curious about. And that's how I feel about the gambling projects that I'm working on at the moment. Like, I steal away moments with that thing. And that's the feeling I look for with things I'm working on. That's how I know when I'm like, yeah, I'm really excited by this, because even me pulling myself out of a writing block to go back to work feels difficult, because I'm like, no, I want to spend time in this thing. I want to be in this thing. I want to figure it out. I want to wade through the idea and expand the world and expand the characters and write down some scene ideas and stuff like that. So curiosity is really important. And it sort of reminds me as well when Elizabeth Gilbert talked about her writing being a love affair she'd have on the side of her job. And I think about that sort of sentiment and the rush of excitement and the sensuality and the real seduction and allure of that. And I try to sort of look for that in the different projects, in the different ideas that I have. Like, what really is going to excite me and light me up? And those are the projects that I want to focus on writing. How has working in distribution impacted what I write? That question I get asked all the time, like genuinely all the time. My response is generally that it doesn't impact what I write, as it shouldn't, because I think the assumption behind that question often is, what buyers are looking for, what the industry trends are, so you would know like what to write or what they'll want to see. That's not the case. I think you cannot, and people say this across the internet all the time, you cannot chase trends, because by the time you finish writing that script and put it in, by the time it's out, it's like 2 or 3 years later, the industry's moved on, they want something else. So it's never worth chasing trends. And I often think, as writers, we're the tastemakers. We're the ones who sort of have our ears to the ground and our antennas up to the universe. So we're sort of downloading ideas and sort of getting inspiration from the things that we're consuming from our own personal lives, from families and friends and all of that stuff. So it doesn't influence what I decide to write, but it does influence my expectations around what I write. Before, with a short film, I might have thought, oh, this will sell and make me some money. And then I realized when I was working in distribution, that's not the case. There isn't really a viable market for selling shorts. Like, there are some buyers out there and, all of that's great, but that's not really what shorts are there to do. And so for me, that just reevaluated, like, if I want to write a short film, why do I want to write it? Maybe I want to go on a festival run. Maybe that's something that I want to do. So having a credited short would do that. Maybe I want to collaborate with somebody to make a short piece of content, and they'll allow me to do that, and to build relationships that way. So it just helps me measure my expectations. And I know with the projects that I'm writing, which ones are cheaper and which ones are more expensive. It also encourages me to think about, when I'm writing something, thinking about distribution early. Actually, if there's anything, but it doesn't impact what I write, it just impacts how I think about what I'm writing. But if there is any impact of me working in distribution on my actual work, it's thinking about distribution early. And that can be a form of procrastination, let me tell you, because I'll be sitting there like, oh yeah, we could get these t-shirts and we could like buy out these venues and we could do this and this and this and this and it'll be so amazing. And have I written a script yet? No, all of that is useless. But it is helpful to think about what you want it to do and where you want it to go. And what I was actually going to say is thinking about where I would want it to be distributed. So the kind of show I'm writing, what is the kind of channel or the kind of streamer that would pick that up. And this is a point actually someone talked to me about, was just like, if you want it to play on the BBC, you might want to consider taking out some of these words. I'm like, that's a very good point. So thinking about distribution it's not super important, to be honest, not super duper important, but it's helpful to have an idea of how you want it to be out in the world. That's what I'd say. How do you find time to write whilst working full time? That is a question and a half. And I'm actually really happy to talk about this because I am, as we know, a little bit of a productivity nerd. So there is this thing called an ideal week calendar, which is effectively, if you use Google Calendar like I do, you can like create a blank calendar and you will just like plot out your ideal week. And so how I do this for myself is I put in first my, I guess, like non-negotiables. So I don't know, if you have a kid and you have like a certain pickup time from school, or if you have a work and you've got to be at work by a certain time and finish at a certain time, all of those things would go into your calendar first. And then you spawn out from there. And so I was like, okay, well, if I want to go and if I need to be at work by 10, and before I start work, I want to do an hour of screenwriting, I want to do an hour workout, and I want some like time. I'm a person who needs like morning time to like potter around. So if I want to do all those things, I need 4 hours before I start work to complete all of that. So that's how I sort of plan my week, and that's how I managed to fit screenwriting in around work, is thinking backwards from my work obligations. I know for me the evening is not a good time for me to do like creative work, so I just write off the evenings. It's like, I'm not going to be writing in the evening. I've tried many times and it just doesn't work. And I think that's also a good point as well, if you're trying to like fit any creative work around your standard work, is to take an experimental approach and just try different things. And that's what I've done for years, is just try a bunch of different things and different ways of structuring my day and see what feels right, see what works, see what doesn't, very quickly throw away things that don't. I'm not one of those people who's like, you need to wake up at 5 a.m. and you need to kill the day. No, everyone doesn't need to wake up at 5 a.m. Some people need to wake up at 5 a.m. Some people need to wake up at 10. That's fine. That is absolutely fine. Do what you have to do for you, how you need to do it for you. And the best way to figure that out is just by trying a bunch of different things and seeing how it goes. And sorry, I am so nasal, but I am ill, so hence the tea and the Prosecco. I feel like I need some vapor rub. Did I finish answering that question? I don't know. Before, I think I'd set myself like 4-hour blocks on the weekends. I was like, okay, I'm gonna write 4 hours on Saturday and I'm gonna write 4 hours on Sunday. And it just wasn't realistic, like it wasn't happening. And again, like my creative guru, Elizabeth Gilbert, she said that she's obviously a full-time writer, but she was like, she doesn't write for more than 2 hours a day. And I was like, oh, and here I am feeling like I've got to force myself to do 4 hours a day. And I was like, I don't actually need to do 4 hours a day. Like if I did 2.5 hours of focused work on a Saturday and a Sunday, and then I do 1 hour every day during the week. That's 10 hours of the week that I've done screenwriting, and that feels good to me. And so I would say find a number that feels good to you, and then plot that into your calendar and try a bunch of different things. How do you handle all the rejections? I really don't. And it actually feels very karmic as well, because part of my responsibility in my job is to send rejections. So on some level, whenever I receive one, I'm like, this is karma. But I don't know, does anyone handle rejections well? Like, even though I know that there is advice around there about, you know, every no is a step closer to your yes, and don't go out there looking for yeses, go out there looking for no's, and all of that kind of advice, like I get it and it's helpful sometimes, but I do think something I've been learning over the past year is there is credit and credence to letting a rejection hurt. Because, you know, like there are things I've applied for, I was like, oh my God, I really hope I get that competition win, or hope I get shortlisted for that, and it doesn't happen, and you feel really disappointed, and you feel like you're questioning the integrity of your work, and, you know, is it that good? Is it as good as other people say it is? If it's not getting any recognition, yeah, rejection sucks. But actually, going back to working in distribution, what it has taught me, because like I said, sending out rejection emails is part of my job, it's taught me that they really aren't personal. I know, like, receiving a rejection feels very personal, but they aren't personal at all, because a lot of the times it's because the competition, the company, have a very specific thing that they're looking for, and they are looking for projects that align with that specific thing. Also, it is highly subjective, and it can be influenced by things like the mood of the reader that day. Like, it's so, like, the possibility of being like shortlisted or winning is so, there's so many variables involved that actually it doesn't even have to be your sort of writing that loses it for you. It's just that it's not quite aligned with the thing that they're looking for this year, or, you know, the person who read it just wasn't really enthused by it, didn't really get it, or whatever the case may be. So rejection is not personal. That is something I've learned. But I would say, even knowing that, it still doesn't take the sting out of some of them. It just is what it is. It's just part, I just feel like it's just part of it. So yeah, you just sort of accept that the pain of rejection and the hurt of rejection is just part of what it means to be a writer, part of what it means to be a creative. And we just hold each other's hands and give each other's hugs and cheer each other on for doing what we can. And I think that's why, for me, ultimately, with rejections, it became really important to focus on my do and deliver goals, which, you know, I've shared in a previous video, but to focus on what I can do, focus on what I can deliver, and let the rest be the rest. I can't, you know, I'm not involved in whether or not a competition or a production company or a commissioner decides that they want this thing. That's not actually my job. It's not my responsibility. I've done my bit and they will do theirs. And so, yeah, I just think if I focus on what I do, if I focus on what I deliver, and I celebrate those with the same excitement that I would like being shortlisted for a competition, then that's it. I think that's why it's been so on my heart this year to lean into the journey and the joy and the process of that journey. What is your favourite and least favourite part of being a debut screenwriter? I'm going to start with my least favourite and go to my favourite, because I like to end on a positive note. So my least favourite thing is not knowing. I don't know if this actually changes as you get more experience. Somebody let me know. But I just feel like at the moment, it's like every time I sit down to write, there is something new to learn. Like, I feel like I still need to burn into my brain like the 5-act structure and like where everything should be and like how it should be struck. Like, I have to burn into my brain the structure part of things and remind myself constantly about that. And I'd love to be in a place where that's a bit more second nature and I don't necessarily have to think about it. I'm just doing it. Is that my least favorite part? No, that's not genuine. That's not a genuine answer. Let me drink some of this and I'll give you a real answer. I feel like that's got stronger. Do you know what my least favorite part is? Oh my God, how could I miss this? My least favorite part of being a debut screenwriter is not knowing the path. So like, I worked in marketing before, right? So like, there was a path. If you wanted to become a CMO, there was a very clear path to follow. You know, you start as a marketing assistant, you work your way up through the different marketing roles, and you could one day become a chief marketing officer. That was a very real possibility. What I find really difficult is you sort of decide that you want to be a writer, in my case a screenwriter, and you want to work in this field, but it's like there's no path. And you ask all the people that have done this already, and everyone has a completely different story for how they ended up where they ended up. And I mean, there are some similarities, right? So some people who've gone the competition route, but everyone can't go the competition route. And most of the people in the industry haven't come through competitions. So you're like, well, what do I do? How do I actually bridge the gap between where I am and where I'm trying to be? So that, like, not knowing, I find really difficult. Like, even today, I was just like, this is just crazy. Like, it's like I'm just staring at a forest ahead of me, and I'm like, there is no path. So I'm sort of just gonna have to thresh through the vegetation and hope something emerges on the other side. Like, that can't be right, but it is. That is it. And on the other hand, I sort of think of it as like, oh, well, this is sort of a beautiful act of co-creation with the universe, and you get to write the story of how this thing happens for you. So yeah. So that's my least favorite part, is the unknown path, the uncertainty of how to actually do this thing. I think my favorite part of being a debut screenwriter is learning, because I find it so much fun to do like a Shonda Rhimes masterclass, or Aaron Sorkin one, or a Bill Lawrence one, and just like a Jed Mercurio one, going to workshops and doing table reads, reading other people's scripts, like peer scripts. I find all of that just so interesting, like the learning process of like, how do you actually tell a really engaging and compelling story for screen? How do you do that? So that's the part I'm really enjoying, nerdily enough. Like, that is my favorite part right now. How do you decide what competitions to submit to? Great question. The most important thing I would say with competitions is to first ask yourself, what do you want from it? So I know that I want opportunities to be developed more. And so the kind of competitions I'm going for tend to be ones that are offering writer development opportunities or mentorship. I'm not tending to go for competitions that are just like awards based necessarily. Like, yes, as a result of this, you be given an award. Like, I don't want an award. I'm like, that would be lovely, but I don't need awards right now. I would like mentorship. I'd like to grow as a writer. So competitions that offer that are really important to me. And then within that is knowing, which ones, if you're writing a feature script, what are the competitions that are accepting features, or the competitions that are well known in the feature space. If you're doing TV, what are the competitions that are well known in the TV space? And that is how I do it, basically. And this year was the first year where I really looked ahead and was like, all right, well, if I want to enter Channel 4, if I want to enter BBC in autumn, what script do I need to be developing now in order for it to be ready come November, December time? And that felt really good to me, to like get ahead of it, because I feel like so many times I feel like I've just been, trying to catch up to the competition. Like, it's been announced and then I'm like, can I turn around a script in 4 weeks? So if I can get ahead of that this year, that would be incredible. So that's my plan. The gambling script I'm developing at the moment, that's what I'm planning to submit for Channel 4 and BBC writers at the end of this year. But yeah, I go for well-known competitions and I think about what it is that I actually want to get out of the competition in terms of which ones I'll actually apply for. Because for example, this year, Sundance Episodic Lab is on my list every year. And when I was looking at it this year, I was like, I don't have a script that I think will be ready in time. And I also don't want to rush it and put it in and it's not quality work. I feel like for that, I also want to submit quality work. So again, with the gambling one I'm thinking about it as like, I can put that in for Channel 4, I can put it in BBC, and then I can put it in for Sundance the following year, Sundance Episodic Lab. Also, I'm not going to have a feature script, so I'm skipping the Nicole one as well. So I was like, I've got 2 I wanted to hit in January, which the first one was the TV Foundation New Writers Collective. That was one which I've submitted to, and that gives you mentorship. It gets you to go to Edinburgh TV Festival, which I'd love to go to. And yeah, they're looking for new voices and new writers. And then there's the BBC Comedy Collective, which I am due to apply for this weekend. I'll let you know if I did. Are you a planner or a pantser? Interesting question, my friend. I am 100% a planner. And I tell you why. When I do not plan, I end up abandoning the story. That is how it goes. And so it just makes sense for me to plan. I don't like staring at a blank page, and I don't like not knowing what to write. And because I learned how to write scripts watching Shonda Rhimes' masterclass, it's just always been a part of my process when it comes to screenwriting, to write a beat sheet, to write an outline, and then go into writing. Because I've literally like lifted her process from the course and just taken it and adapted it for myself. I basically used the same framework that she taught in the class, and as I've been developing projects, I've been adjusting it to like fit my flow. So yeah, planner all the way. I love a plan. It helps. And I think because the argument I've heard is that it sort of takes the fun or the creativity out of it, and it doesn't for me personally. That can very much well be the reality of other people. What I find is it gives me guardrails to play in, which I find really useful, because once I have that sort of structure, or once I have that structure around me, I'm like, okay, what can we do in this space? And so that's really helpful. And I would say as well, like in terms of sort of the creative process, I guess, after I've done the first draft, I will typically rip it up and start again, like genuinely. I will be like, okay, put that to the side. We're gonna start. We're gonna do a whole new beat sheet, we're gonna do a whole new outline, I'm gonna write a whole new script. That's just my process. Where do you find ideas? Good question. Where do I find ideas? Everywhere. I literally find ideas everywhere. And I think, do you know what? This is so mad, but it's so true. So, I obviously wasn't writing for a really long time, and I didn't start screenwriting until 2022. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right, 2022. And oh my gosh, it was like the moment I was like, oh right, yeah, I'm doing this. I came online as a recipient for ideas. And so it was like suddenly I was just getting all these ideas. And I think as well, like, I've mentioned Shonda Rhimes like a million times on this single video, but that was part of the course was talking about ideas and how you come across ideas. And that's where I started to realize, ideas are literally everywhere. Like, it can be anything. For example, with the gambling idea, it's because I came across an article about like, for example, with the gambling idea, it's because I came across an article in The Guardian about the Bet365 boss's earnings for the year. And I thought, she's making a ton of money. What might that be like? And that just sent me off on this whole thing. And I think ideas come from walking through the world a bit more aware, I want to say. Because I felt like when I became more aware and alert to what was happening around me, ideas came to me a lot easier. I didn't really have to, I didn't feel like I was struggling to find ideas. Actually, if anything, right now I'm like, I look at my Trello board and I'm like, there are far too many and I don't know what to do with any of these. And I also did a workshop called Designing Your Creativity System. I think that's what it was called. And as part of it, it was led by Oliver Berkman, who's the author of 4,000 Weeks and Meditations for Mere Mortals. And I'm sure he's written another book, but I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, he talked about what if statements, and he had us do this whole exercise where we just wrote what if and something, what if and something, and we just kept going. And he was like, there you go, those are a bunch of story ideas right there. So story ideas tend to be what if. And so that's how I sort of walk through this world. It's like, what if, I'm trying to think of like a recent example of one. But yeah, the Denise Coates one is a recent example. Seeing that article, and I was like, what if I was a CEO of a billion-dollar gambling company? Let's start there. And thinking about like the moral conflict of that I would feel. I also really like that when I was watching an interview with Elizabeth Gilbert, and she was talking about her idea process. She said she basically gets her ideas to pitch themselves to her and, you know, to basically say why they want to be made. And she's like, you know, I've got a finite amount of time, so, you know, tell me what you are, tell me why you want to be in the world. And if an idea isn't very well thought out or serious enough, then she'll be like, you know, maybe go back, have a little think about that and come back to me when you have more information. And I thought that was quite cool, actually, because I was like, that feels quite badass. Like, you come back to me when you've thought this through, because sometimes I read over an idea that I've put on my list. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, who are you? What are you? What am I meant to do with you? Yeah, so in a very short and simple answer about where you find ideas are everywhere. They are in the news, they are in tweets. Actually, that was where I found an idea, was in a tweet about a guy who was in his early 30s and was entering end of life care. And me being a similar age, was really struck by that, and I wanted to write about it. And I did. And it may be like situations that your friends are going through, it may be situations that family members are going through, that you're going through, that you know someone at work is going through. All those things are idea machines. They're things that you can generate ideas from. And books can be really interesting ways to stimulate ideas as well. Obviously don't copy them, but they can start to like churn up different thoughts and ideas in you. And watching shows, watching films, those also can stir up ideas in you as well. Do you have a mentor? Do I have a mentor? No, I don't have a mentor, and in all honesty, I've always felt really icky about mentorship. Like I find it just to be a strange concept, because especially like starting off in corporate world, you were like, it was such a huge amount of pressure to find a mentor. It was like, find a mentor, and it just feels like such a disingenuous relationship, and I didn't really have the words for it at the time. I didn't know why it felt so like just ugh to me. So I've never had a mentor officially, but I have been mentored, I feel. And the way I sort of think about mentorship is, for example, like look how many times on this alone I've mentioned Elizabeth Gilbert, or I've mentioned Shonda Rhimes. I feel like I've been mentored by them, though I have never met them, though they do not know my name. They have given me so much that has helped benefit my creative life, my creative process, my creative mindset, that I am eternally grateful for. They, again, don't know my name. They have no idea that they've impacted this girl in London in any way, but they have, through the information that they've shared online, through their courses, through their books. So I feel like I have definitely mentored. What I would say is, outside of the sort of mentorship you can get from the creatives who are out there online and who share freely advice, in terms of sort of more day-to-day, I don't look at people as like, I want them to be my mentor. I think more specifically about what is it that I want to know from this person. And I have a friend who has a podcast called Behind the Dreams, and he did an excellent episode on the difference between mentorship, coaching and therapy, and I'll share that as well. But effectively what he said about mentorship is that mentors are people who have done the thing that you want to do, and they are giving you advice on how you can do it yourself. That is what your mentor should do. And so I think oftentimes people want mentors because they want a mentor, and they haven't really thought through why this person's specifically for me. Like, and you know what I mean? Like, past the point of they're successful, right? Like, I could be like, oh, this person's a successful producer of feature films. That is fantastic. But actually, I'm writing a lot of TV at the moment, and actually, I benefit more from like mentorship from another writer as opposed to a producer. So again, it's like, what do I want specifically from mentorship? And I would encourage you, in the same way I encourage myself, to have questions for people. So even like the other day, I was doing a pitch for a project, and I reached out to the creator of Domino Day, and I just sent her a message on Instagram, and I was like, hey, I'm pitching this project, and I just wondered if you had any advice that you could give me on like that whole pitching process and like how I should approach it. It's going to be a very general one, and she wrote me back, and she was just like, yeah, here's some things that you need to think about and all of that. I wouldn't call her a mentor. But I was like, here is somebody who has done something that I want to do, and I would like to get her advice on this thing. So I would try and be as specific as possible with like the information that you want from a mentor, because I also think it's quite awkward. Like, even like if you imagine if you were a mentor and someone's like, oh, can you mentor me? And it's like, what are we actually going to talk about? What do we actually need to address? And it's also like a huge commitment as well. If you're going to be like, oh, you're my mentor, I need you to sit down with me every week and talk about yada, yada, yada. Okay, I don't want to do that, but like, if you have a question, maybe just ask me the question. So yeah, that's how I think about mentorship. Is I just think about people who I really enjoy their work and respect and would love to have a chat with, and I already have, not in my mind, in my notes, I'm like, I have a note for each of those people with key questions that I would want to ask them if I ever got the chance to meet them or talk to them or reach out to them. So yeah, that's how I think about mentorship, and that's all the questions for today's writer Q&A. I hope, as always, that there's something useful or handy or interesting in there. I'm gonna go and finish my Prosecco, probably watch another episode of Breeders, to chill. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on the next video.